continued discussion of the MBTA overlay district with NEMCOG. I guess it was pointed out to me that while we took a vote and made a decision at the last meeting, while that meeting was posted and agenda'd, it wasn't available for public viewing, so we should probably start with announcing that we decided unanimously at the last meeting to choose the two sub-districts that we had previously discussed, amongst others, those two being the Mass West campus with the two adjacent communities, condo communities, and the 110 sub-district from the quarry to Hunt Road.
Yep.
Minus the two single houses.
So Kelly from NIMCOG is on Zoom this evening.
Great. Okay. Do you want to start off, Kelly?
Sure, and I apologize. I had my audio wasn't coming through, so I may have missed the early part. I provided the memo to Evan just to clarify that it is our understanding that the board wishes to proceed with the two following sub-districts as part of its MBTA communities compliance. So the first would be the UMass Lowell West campus, which is approximately 57.7 developable acres. And then the Route 110 West district. However, my understanding is that you want us to remove the single-family lots and add parcels along the east end to comprise the necessary acreage. So I don't have the exact developable acres for that, but we'll make sure that it complies and that we're also sticking within that that goal of 15 dwelling units per acre.
Perfect.
Okay, Kelly, what else did you want to highlight from your memo? And then we can.
Sure. Okay. Sorry, that must be what I missed. I missed the beginning, so I apologize. So the other, there are two other factors that arose based on. Basically, we have two next steps. The first is to determine whether or not we need to do an economic feasibility analysis regarding affordability. And then the second is to get your responses to the zoning questionnaire that we provided, because this will help us craft the final zoning language. Now, Evan has very wisely instructed us to use the UMass Lowell West Overlay District as a model for what we are going to do for this overlay district, largely because the UMass Lowell district comprises most of this district, or a good proportion of this district. So we will be doing that, but we do want to get some of your answers to those questions. Hopefully tonight, so that we can craft that zoning and get back to you with a proposed amendment for your consideration in advance of the November 14th hearing. Mm-hmm. So the first element that we wanted to bring to your attention is we know that at the previous neighborhood meeting, it was discussed as to whether the town wanted to require proposals to exceed 10% affordability. We did some research into this. Under the law, the state basically allows us to provide more than 10% or less, or 20% or less affordability as a requirement. In order to do this, we would need to do an economic feasibility analysis. We are prepared to do this if necessary, but with the understanding that it will take some hours from our contract that we would otherwise probably be doing for neighborhood meetings or other outreach boards and committees in order to just inform them and educate them about what this process is. So that's just something for you to weigh. Basically, the state will allow you to require 10% affordability, and this is so that the town can maintain its current SHI. So that you won't, by producing more units, you won't be falling below your subset, your 10% on your affordable housing inventory. In looking at the districts that you have approved and that you want us to move forward with, there is very little developable area. So you already have an approval for the UMass Lowell West site. The other properties that are under that overlay, that under that potential overlay, not going to be redeveloped because they are multifamily, they're condos. It would take agreement among many condo owners in order to add a single unit, much less multiple units to those parcels. The other location at Route 110 has the same conditions. So, and I believe when we start to look at parcels to the east, we do butt into a wetlands issue. So I would need to confirm that with Mike, who's our GIS expert. But I do believe that the developable area of that parcel, if we expand to the east, you're really maybe looking at 3 acres. So what we're asking you is to determine whether the difference between, so if it's, let's assume that it's 3 acres that we need to make up in the subdistrict 2, the Route 110. You need to direct us to conduct an economic feasibility analysis for 3 acres, which would be about 45 units, which would yield a difference between under 10% affordability, it would be 4.5 units, probably rounded up to 5. Under 20% affordability, it would be, I believe, 9 units. I have this written down somewhere. I can't do math in my head. I'm sorry. Yeah, 9 affordable units. So I think what we are asking for you is to understand, do you want us to move ahead? Do you want us to try to demonstrate that 20% affordability works from an economic feasibility standpoint? I don't believe that it will. And that is because based on research on inclusionary zoning at high percentages really only works if you are offering sufficient incentives for someone to do that. And it really works best in communities where there is a high amount of housing production. So Chelmsford has seen housing production, but not at the rates that inclusionary zoning at a high percentage, like 20 or 25% would prove. And I just want to raise to your attention that the state will not allow us to submit an MBTA community zoning overlay that includes a 25% affordability. And because the reason for that is because when you require 25% affordability, it effectively renders the ability to develop those parcels inert, because it doesn't pencil out from a development standpoint. And that is largely because the cost of development in Chelmsford is pretty much the same as the cost of development in Boston. And you cannot get the same kind of rents in Chelmsford that you can in the Seaport District. So a developer will effectively, requiring a 25% affordability will effectively disallow or will prohibit those those units from being created. So that is why the state will not allow you to go beyond 20%. So I think one of the things that we're asking you for tonight is to understand whether, sorry, I have a Zoom bomb in the background here, ask you whether you want us to, if there is an affordable housing percentage that you want us to explore that is greater than 10%, or if you want to stick with the state's allowed maximum of 10%.
If we set it at 10%, can we change it down the road after things have passed?
You can. You would probably still be required to perform an economic feasibility assessment.
Okay.
Because the purpose of MBTA communities is to allow housing production of various types, not just affordable housing production, but allow them at all scales.
Yep.
All right. I think we want to go with 10%. And I see no reason
We
not
had
to.
talked about looking for grant opportunities in terms of the funding required to do the study, the feasibility analysis. Is that not like a realistic thing with the time frame we're working under, or?
So our recommendation would be that if you did want us to proceed with an economic feasibility assessment, we would submit the zoning on November 28th as anticipated, with the understanding that the state may reject whatever we would be asking the state to review all aspects except the affordability requirement, right? So we would be independently doing that economic feasibility assessment because we just don't have time to get that done likely between now and November 28th. We're also crafting the zoning. So that would be something that we would be waiting on. Okay. And then once we receive feedback from the state on whether the zoning complies or not, then we would also be at the point where you could determine what sort of affordability requirement you would want to pursue.
And you would be looking at the entire area, even though some of it is, you don't think will be built in the short term because it's condos and stuff, but we're looking at the whole area for increasing the percentage, right? I wasn't clear. I wasn't sure how you were.
Right. So, I mean, you could basically do two separate districts. You could create one standard for affordability for the UMass Lowell West district, and then a separate standard for affordability for the Route 110. That would be an option to you. It's just that we would need to be, if the affordability requirements exceeded 10%, we would need to do separate economic feasibility analyses for both of them if they were two different levels.
But that feasibility study would encompass the entire sub-district and not just the immediately developable land, correct?
Right, it would be over
Okay.
the entire sub-district. We're basically looking at the economic feasibility of development with an inclusionary zoning requirement of something that exceeds 10% for Chelmsford. And if your target is 12.5% or 15% for one district and 15% or 20% for a separate district, then we would just need to do those two different studies. Mm-hmm. And whatever the studies say would bear out is whether or not you can include those requirements as part of your zoning.
I still feel, for the rest of the group, I still feel strongly that we should pursue this. And my percentage would be like 15% is what I'd like to target.
I kind of tend to agree, but I'm wondering if it might not make more sense to go with the 10% now, because if I understood correctly, we can always revisit, and we should probably plan to revisit. I would like to see 15 also. I think that's a good number, and it protects the town well. But,
And
go
the
ahead.
reason why I was asking about that is because none of this land is developable in the short term.
Right.
Right, so we
So
have
have
time.
time.
we have some time in order to be able to change that. So if we can submit it with the minimum that we can maintain at
Yeah.
Right.
for now, and then in a few months, once we're done the big rush to get it done, then do the feasibility study
Yeah.
with grant funding and
Yeah, that would be my
close
feeling.
it down the road.
But you have to go back in front of town meeting to get it approved.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just do it all now. We're like,
I don't think we'll get, it
you can
doesn't sound
submit
like we'll get
and
it
then that
done.
way-
It sounds like there's a time issue.
Yeah,
I didn't hear
that's what I
that.
heard.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Maybe I misunderstood then. I thought there was a time issue for when we went to submit it without that on the 28th, but then we would have time before town meeting to do the feasibility, or is that no? Did I misunderstand?
No, so you can do that. You can choose to do that. The only thing, and we can do that within the contract that we have with the town under Mass Housing Partnership. The one thing for this board to weigh is that we are also scheduled under that contract to do a number of meetings with your select board, your financial committee, other committees in order to describe and educate them and inform them about what this zoning amendment is. Mm-hmm. We would maybe need to forfeit some of those meetings in order to account for the hours that it would take to do the economic feasibility analysis. Because it all needs to happen under the contract.
And when we submit it to the state, we would be submitting it without essentially the set percent.
Yes.
And would that hurt or help, or would that?
The state would, so this is something that happened in the town of Arlington. They submitted their zoning for review. Arlington has a deeper affordability requirement and a higher requirement than the 10% already. And so they went ahead with the zoning with the understanding that if the state came back and said, with the understanding that the state would say in their response that you need to provide an economic feasibility analysis in order to get approval. And if that economic feasibility analysis does not say that 15 or 20% would financially work, if that would impair any projects, then the town would need to agree that whatever you put in your warrant in the spring, we're looking at a February 26th deadline, I believe, whatever is included in that warrant would need to stick to the 10% or whatever percentage bears out from an economic feasibility perspective.
Right.
Evan, what's our current requirement right now?
10.
10?
It mirrors 40B, so it's upwards of 20 to 25%.
Okay.
Oh, okay, the wrong number, yeah.
The inclusionary housing bylaw.
Yeah.
My thought from listening to Kelly's presentation, it sounds like for Littleton Road, raising that threshold, you'd only be talking about adding maybe, 5 units, if I heard correctly,
Well-
4 to 5, depending on how much you went. My concern would be for Princeton Street, you'd be talking hundreds of units, potentially, if it were.
Well, we're making assumptions about the short-term developability of all this stuff, and it doesn't look big. But, when your horizon gets out 5, 10 years, we really don't know what the economics are going to look like for development. We can guess, but we don't really know. I think the protection that we need is for that longer term.
Like, so we're sacrificing hours of Kelly's time coming and presenting in front of the select board and FinCom. However, if we went and got the grant, would that cover it, Kelly?
I'm not really sure what grant you're talking about. I think you can pursue grant funding through the state. I'm definitely not the expert in that category.
But Anita,
Evan, you had said last time, yeah.
Yeah, the current grant that NIMCOG is operating under runs through, I think it's February. And that granting authority, that money in that contract would have to be expended before they provided additional funding. What I did say to the board is, depending on the budget of the economic feasibility study, that, we could likely find it. Obviously depending on how important it was to the board. So if you truly want it done, the town will find a way to get it done. It just we may not be able to do it as part of the initial adoption, depending on whether we can find money within the existing town budget, or if there is a different set of grant opportunities outside of MHB.
but in addition to the funding, it's also their time too. And
Yeah, so what
It's not unlimited.
what
Yeah.
NIMCOG is saying to you is that their budget is maxed.
Right.
There's no flexibility
All
in their
spoken
budget
for.
right
Their
now.
time is spoken for.
Right.
And
And as you
But in
recall,
reality-
we budgeted NIMCOG to assist the board through the public hearing process all the way up to town meeting and at town meeting. So that's what Kelly's asking you. Do you still value that assistance? And if you
I think I do.
if you want to reduce some of that, then that money can be allocated towards the economic feasibility.
And given how challenging things are to get past a town meeting
Yeah,
and how
we need
much
that
we
support.
do need that PR and the outreach, I would be more happy in focusing their time on that rather than
Something that's not
increasing
gonna
the
happen.
increasing the percentage when we wouldn't need it right now anyway. I would rather focus that time later in making the
I
change.
feel like it's
Highly
kind of,
unlikely
it's
to
kind
ever.
of.
But what I
moot.
heard, though,
Highly
wasn't
unlikely
that
to
it's a
ever
matter
come
of
into
time,
play.
it's a matter of
Highly
money.
unlikely.
Yeah,
Right
I
on
feel like
that?
it's rather moot in terms of I mean,
I think it's just
we
a waste of time.
intentionally have picked areas that are very unlikely to be developed so that, I mean, I think to spend a lot of time and dollars for the potential of 5 units, I don't think there's any potential short-term or even medium-term in the UMass district.
That's
And I
locked in,
think
right?
there's very little in the 110 district. That's why we picked these districts. So it seems like it's
I
going
under-
down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I think it's just a waste
Well-
of energy, myself.
Okay, can I just have clarification, though? Is this a contract issue that we don't have the hours in the contract? Or is it, because if we were to add on to this contract, would you be able to do this?
So we cannot add on to this contract under MHP. So our contract is set what it is through the end of February. We can't increase it. So if you wanted to pursue this with us, then we would need to deduct hours from another service that we've already outlined in our scope of work. Or you would need to find a third independent consultant to do that. I will note that one thing you could consider providing is in your zoning, you could provide some sort of incentive for a developer to go beyond 10%. So you could say, well, if you do provide up to 25% affordable housing, we'll allow you an extra story or two or parking reduction or whatever. So that is still an option within the zoning. But as far as an economic feasibility analysis is concerned, I believe what we are really talking about is whether or not that 3 acres of land that needs to get moved on the 110 route, the Route 110 parcel, justifies the need to do an entire feasibility analysis for the difference between 9 affordable units or 5 affordable units.
We get it.
Well,
Okay, so should we
Vote on
take
10%?
it
Yeah.
around and take a vote
I think we just vote on it at this point,
Yeah.
right?
on whether we want to stick with the 10% for the moment, and we can come back and revisit a higher percent at a later date if it seems like it's to be beneficial.
I'm good with 10%.
I'll take a motion.
I'd like to make a motion on voting on exactly what you just said.
and I'll second.
You gotta actually say it.
On whether or not, on an affirmative of 10% with being able to come back at it at a later date with more information, maybe, and a
And time.
consultant, maybe.
Yep.
So we have a motion and a second. Chris?
Aye.
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 Anita in
Aye.
Zoomland? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, so that's one thing down.
Yes. So the second was that we provided you with a zoning questionnaire. And again, I do want to be clear that I think Evan has rightfully pointed out that the UMass Lowell West zoning overlay is a good model, and we want to follow that because it's clearer, it's very concise. The sample zoning from the state is very long and it has a lot of questions. But what we are trying to get to with this zoning questionnaire are a couple of key decisions that will affect how we model this out and how we draft the zoning, so that when you have the amendment before you, in advance of November 14, we're able to put in certain numbers that this board has agreed to.
So I have a question about that. If we model the zoning based on the UMass district zoning, and in the unlikely eventuality that one of those condo associations should decide to raise themselves and be redeveloped,
Yes.
would we then be committing to large apartment buildings? Because I mean, I feel like the UMass zoning is already locked in, and so
Yes.
we don't have to worry about that anymore. But if we made the district have zoning that looks more like that middle that we're striving for, it wouldn't necessarily be mirroring the UMass district, despite
So I
its,
believe what we have modeled so far is 3 stories.
right.
So we're not modeling,
Okay,
now,
that's fine, that's fine.
yeah,
Even though we do have 4.
Even though we did with the UMass. Okay, gotcha.
yeah.
That was the source of my concern. Okay.
So I don't know if you want me to run through some of
Yeah.
these questions to get
Yeah.
your responses now? Okay. The first is whether or not the board would like to allow mixed use on the ground floor within any subdistrict. So, basically, the MBTA communities law requires that the development be allowed by right. Now, you could, essentially, in this overlay district, you could allow mixed use on the ground floor by right, or you could allow it with a special permit. I would discourage you from encouraging the special permit because then that gets us into a whole separate section of the guidance. But I think what we're looking for tonight is to understand whether you would allow any uses other than residential or parking on the ground floor. And you could have a different response to the UMass Lowell district versus the Route 110 district.
It doesn't fit either one, so.
Yeah, I'd say no.
Nope. Nope.
You don't want it?
Nope.
Not in
about,
these,
like,
not
Not
in
on
these
these properties.
locations. If we were doing another area that we were talking about, maybe that's a lot
Right.
Like,
different.
what about the bank?
But anywhere in that zone, they could put mixed use. You could have it in the middle of the complex. It's not gonna work.
No, it doesn't
If
work.
it was,
Well,
if it
nobody's
was
gonna
street
do it.
facing on 110. But how do you,
But what-
can you clarify just along the roadway?
Well,
And I thought we only were gonna be counted for 25%, because we talked about Chelmsford
Oh, right.
Mall having that.
Is that
This
the-
this would basically, this wouldn't require, so there's a difference between this and then the way that the state adjusted the guidelines in August was that certain communities, and we determined that Chelmsford doesn't really qualify to do this, could require mixed use in the ground floor. What we're asking is if you would want to allow it.
So if we allowed it by right, then we wouldn't have a reduction in the units that would be counted by 25%.
Right, exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So you could either allow it by right, or you could incentivize it.
Could
by
we
right.
make it just allowed by right on the street facing Route 110, to Mike's point?
We can look into that. If that is something that you want us to explore, we can definitely
Well,
do that.
I don't think any of these really,
I would not want this by right. I would want this by
yeah,
special
I
permit.
would want it by special permit,
or
too.
not
Okay.
a,
So I think opening that up by right could be dangerous
Yeah, yeah, I
because
agree.
we don't know what we're going to get.
Right, yeah, you're right.
I mean, you could limit certain uses. So you could say we will allow X, Y, and Z uses by right, otherwise mixed use is not allowed.
Well, we could do, I mean, we could essentially say,
Alpine
Light
Lane would have
retail.
been different.
Huh?
Right.
Alpine Lane would have been a different story. These
Right.
properties, it
would have
doesn't
been totally different.
And
work with.
you're not recommending by right or by special permit for this?
I just think it gets really, I think we get into difficult territory as far as compliance is concerned, with the state's review of this. So I would recommend that you either allow development by right, and then if it's not residential, you pick certain uses that you also want to allow by right on the ground floor, or you say, no, it's only residential.
It's only residential, because that's what
So,
we're aiming for.
Chris, if you look at Lexington, they did a great job with this. Allowing in a village kind of area, they designated a village area where they have, and they really did it tightly, I thought, about what they allow on the first floor, in the setbacks requirements and what percentage of it. Like, so it isn't like you just open the floodgates and say, okay, you can allow this type of retail on the first floor. It is very, very tight. And if we were going to do something like that, that's what I would recommend.
But we don't have a village district.
Yeah, and again, because this is state mandated, I would rather us control that separately.
Yeah.
And really focus it in areas that we would want to, like Alpine Lane. And I would not want it in this area for now. Because again, if we're trying to really just do the minimum,
Well, I, for one, am pretty much in favor of certain kinds of mixed use, and we've discussed some of that in the Center Village context. I think you could frame a by right situation here tightly enough And having grown up in Lexington and going through there from time to time, I know what you mean. I think we could make it tight enough that we could have our cake and eat it too.
What did they allow in there, Anita?
Oh, I could pull it up now. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I remember like it was only a certain percentage of like, and they specifically disallowed a bunch of things.
What we can do as part of bringing back the zoning to you for the 14th is we can look at Lexington. We can propose a certain number of uses that you would allow by right, and then on the 14th, you can decide whether to strike some of those uses or not.
I think that makes
Yeah,
sense.
or you could decide, we would allow this in the UMass Lowell West, but not in the Route 110 or whatnot. So if, just to kind of, I know this board's time is tight tonight, so I just want to be aware of that. If that is what you want us to do, we're happy to look into that.
Okay, I think that would be great.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, Kelly, I would just also look at how much, how big it was too, and all the other, because they really did a good job about making sure that so many feet from the street, it was only this big, it was I would look at all of it if you could.
We are happy to do that. That's fine. The second question is if there are accessory uses that should also be permitted. So this could be parking or parking garages, recreational amenities, EV charging, cafes, bike storage, etc. Accessory to the, I guess a cafe isn't necessarily an accessory use, that would be mixed use. But if there was any other accessory uses that you would want allowed permitted as of right in this district.
Well, I mean, the density is going to be high enough that most of the things that we tend to think of as accessory uses wouldn't make any sense there anyway. You couldn't fit them in. Stuff like this seems reasonable.
Yeah. I think EV stations is a good idea in
have to- you
these
have to do
types of
that.
areas.
Yeah.
And I think we should
I would
be left open for parking
Yeah.
garages, because I've seen a lot of
Yeah.
multi-stories that they have the garage embedded in the building itself.
Yeah.
In the back, on the side, but it's all, so they can go in front
Yep.
for their apartment,
Yep.
I don't know. I don't think we should exclude it.
Correct.
And then
Can we add something that if there's a development that comes in that's over 40 units, that they add a recreational area, some green? It have a playground or something as well, a greenery.
Yeah,
If it's a certain size
that.
over, they're building something over, I don't know, 40, 50 units, that they have to include some sort of park area for kids to play with.
yeah, and that may be something that is added as part of site plan review, or there's some sort of, I think, unit trigger that indicates that the board wants to see X, Y, or Z. The one thing we would just need to model for that is whether or not that would change the compliance model. But I think the other question is that, what we'll get to later on is whether you have specific requirements regarding setbacks, or if there is a zoning district that you want us to look at as far as setbacks and open space and, coverage are required. So we can look into all these things. Should I move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Are multiple principal allowed buildings on a lot allowed?
I think we have to say yes.
Okay. Yeah. So one factor of this that would, if you did want to encourage more of that missing middle style housing or townhomes or separate duplexes, that sort of thing, you would want to consider this as an allowed under your dimensional standards.
Yes.
Do you want, we recommend against establishing a minimum lot size. And that is, again, that really relates more to communities with smaller lots like Billerica, which is what we're looking at around their station area. But I just think it starts to get a little bit tricky in the compliance model when we are requiring a lot size that is perhaps larger than what any of the parcel sizes are in the zoning district. So we just want to clarify that with you. If you do want to require a minimum lot size, we can explore how that would impact the compliance model. However, we do recommend against setting them.
It strikes me that with the number of units per acre that gets
Density.
defined here, and with some sort of, what you might call typical frontage and side yard and what have you, and the height, problem's going to solve itself. I mean, they're quite apart from a minimum lot size. I think we may wind up in situations where there's just no way to build this on too small a lot. I don't think the lot size itself is going to be determinative.
Yeah. Do other people agree?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
So the required percentage of open space, I mean, it kind of goes to what Anita was asking about in terms of a green space or an amenity.
Yes, so, I mean, you could require a certain percentage of open space. I believe right now in your UMass Lowell district to require 50%. I don't know if that will work for the compliance model. That seems pretty large. I think what the sample zoning encourages is like 20 to 30%.
Yeah.
So I think I also just want to acknowledge that you could require open space or you could require rear yard setbacks, side yard, front yard setbacks. I think, setbacks also do provide open space.
Right.
They just maybe do it in a way that's not specifically tied to the definition of open space.
Well, I mean, what if we said something that we would, like, say, shoot for 25, that they could use the setbacks to get to that 25%, but that we would also look favorably upon, a community amenity on a development that might make us willing to reduce the parking or something. I don't know. I mean, I would value the having a playground on a multifamily development, so
Yeah.
I'd like to figure out a way to make that happen. Actually,
Okay. And I think that I think playing with the setbacks, and or playing with the open, I mean, I think you may want to consider like front yard setbacks or side yard setbacks. But if you do either of those in tandem with an open space requirement, that's something we could look at as part of site plan review as well, or development standards. Sorry, zoning is hard because it keeps flipping around from section to section. So we can look at 25% if that's what you want us to take a look at. Maximum building height, we looked at 3 stories. Is there any wish to change that?
No,
no, I think that's good.
Okay,
it still matches the code. The code is 3 stories,
okay,
40 feet.
okay. Maximum building coverage, I mean, if you're gonna require 75 or 25% open space, then, your maximum building coverage, I think the other way you can accomplish something like maximum building coverage is through your setback requirements. So it's just, different communities have different preferences. So I don't know if that's something you want to consider or you want us to look at in the compliance model.
Yeah, so the ranges are normally in the
Yeah, let me open up our.
pretty big range on the standard that you submitted, 20 to
Yeah.
95.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's like, if you want to think about like Lexington, right? Think about some of those parcels in their downtown area that they rezone. Those are already completely covered with a building. And so 95% may make sense there because there's a lot of shared parking situation, et cetera. 25% is going to yield, if you go as low as 25%, you may end up needing to adjust your height requirement in order
get to the
to
units.
get to your capacity, right? Because this is all like,
Puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. We're doing calculus, not just straight up. Oh, it's algebra. So you can either think about maximum building coverage, or you could consider just having requirements as far as front yard, side and rear yard setbacks. And if there is a separate section of your zoning bylaw that you want us to look at as a model so that it's consistent, we're also happy to do that. And-
I would suggest you look at the existing RM.
RM, yeah.
That's what I was just gonna suggest, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Littleton Road was built under RM.
Yeah.
Okay, that is something we're happy to model out, and if it's something that already works for this community and it's already passed town meeting, that may
Yeah.
be something that would be more beneficial to you. So, do you want us to look at that as far as building coverage, frontage, front yard, rear yard, setbacks?
so.
that
I
sort of
think
thing?
that
Yeah, I
makes
mean, it's
sense.
all the numbers interrelate.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we'll look at that, we'll model it out, and if it doesn't work, we'll flag it for you and let you know.
Perfect.
As far as parking, we modeled for your compliance, so what we have presented to you for the UMass Lowell and the Route 110 meets the compliance model standards. We used 1.6 parking spaces per unit. That would mean that if it was a studio unit, it'd be 1.6 spaces. You're probably not going to use 1.6 spaces. You're going to use one. If it's a 2 or a 3 family, it would also require 1.6 spaces. We can go lower than this. We can go to 1 or we can go to 1.5,
wouldn't do it.
but we don't recommend going higher because that will then change the compliance model.
I'd say stay at 1.6.
1.6 it is.
It's fine,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. I mean, 90% of every unit probably has two cars. So 1.6 will not work for any development. But if that's what the group wants to go through, just acknowledge it.
I will say that a developer will not provide less parking than they think is needed for to rent or sell a space. So what you set as your minimum is just your minimum. They could go more than that.
But we we could not require more.
No,
Right,
No.
so,
UMass West was 1.6.
yeah. No, I agree.
Well, yeah.
There's gonna be a parking issue.
So that's a minimum. If they want more, they can propose more and you can
They can
grant more.
propose, but we cannot require more.
Correct.
Right, so that's.
But they
so-
felt very comfortable, I think, with the
Yeah, sure.
1.6. They
All
didn't
the
think
40Bs are 1.7. You know, it'd be
Fine.
different if a developer came in with 100% 3-bedroom units, then clearly
Yeah.
1.6 isn't going to work. But to your point, they're likely going to,
No, I mean, the average household has
They'll
more than
likely
2 cars.
propose more parking if
At
they're-
least 2 cars.
if they're
minimum.
building a lot
It's
of
2 adults.
3-bedroom
Not
units.
everybody, but
Yeah.
just doesn't work. I mean, it just, I mean, I understand what we're trying to do here, but it's just, it
1.6
doesn't- it
works
doesn't work.
for a mix of 1s and 2s and a little bit of 3s.
Yeah. It's just that
What
the
you see
the
around
parking's
town.
gonna overflow onto the streets and into the public spaces. So, just, I mean, as long as we acknowledge as a board what we're doing.
Would you want to go to 2?
No, I'd go with 2 and then give them an option, that if they go with more parking, they get, either less green space or vice
You mean
versa. Or if they
1.6?
if they wanna go with, more green space, then we can drop the parking space. I mean, you give them an incentive. But, just something to think about. We don't have to decide it tonight.
Well, I mean, if we did more than 1.6, then the model that they've done isn't going to,
No, I know, I understand. We cannot go, could not go higher. I see that right here, so.
Yeah.
1.6, I mean, it is what it is.
okay. Do you want to include a bike parking and storage requirement?
Yes.
definitely bike
Yeah,
parking.
If we don't, the BPAC will never forgive us.
Okay, is there a section in your zoning bylaw that you want us to look at as far as a bike parking requirement? Or, we do know of other zoning bylaws that require bike parking as part of it, and they require that, they sort of set the standards separate from the vehicle
22
parking.
for
They
some
set it
reason.
based on housing,
We don't have
housing.
anything in the zoning.
I didn't
Isn't
think
that right?
so.
It was like.
Okay.
Yeah, we should probably put something in there.
But it
Is
didn't
this,
say 22.
is this an area where the bike group?
They may have some standards. I'll reach out to them.
Yeah.
And what about storage?
Yeah, so one thing I've seen used is that a community set a standard of short-term parking, although that's usually for mixed use, and then long-term bike parking. So that may mean some sort of internal or secured bike parking that's protected from the elements, just like a car might be in a covered garage or something.
Yeah,
I'd see what the bike committee recommends.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Evan, I will coordinate with you on
Sure.
that. Okay, great. Do you want to require, or do you elsewhere in your zoning bylaw require EV charging stations?
We should.
Yes, we should.
And-
We don't have,
okay,
it's
is
not
it-
in our code, I
We don't
believe.
require it right now, but it will be required as part of the town's adoption of the stretch code.
Stretch
Yeah.
code, yeah.
Okay,
So let's just go with
okay,
it.
so
What is it
if
in
you
the
want
stretch
us to,
code?
we could review
think
the
it's
stretch code and see what's
20%.
compliant with that.
20%. Because I read somewhere in here 1 per 20, and I thought, gosh, that's awful low.
Yeah, so just for context, all of these things right now, going back to accessory uses, bike amenities, EV charging, we don't prohibit any of that right now.
Of course not.
So if you do nothing, if you don't include any of this in the bylaw, it doesn't preclude somebody from proposing it. It also doesn't preclude the planning board from asking as part of site plan approval. What's being asked tonight is whether you specifically want to require it.
Yeah, and I think for me, these areas and this specifically, these developments should
Yeah,
have these
exactly
things.
where you should have it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they all will, 5+ years out from now.
Yeah.
But that's what we're talking about.
Yep.
If you would like, we can look at the stretch code and see what the percentage requirement is in the stretch code and just model this based on that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Moving on to site plan review. So is there do you want to do site plan review for any development under these overlay zones, or is there a threshold? So if it is greater than X number of housing units, like
Well-
if it's 3 housing units, do you want to do site plan review?
You currently do.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean,
And if you're not going to do a minimum lot area, then you're likely to see projects less than 15 units an acre.
yep,
Yeah, I would like to see site plan reviews for all of this.
absolutely.
Okay. I know you have site plan review standards elsewhere in your bylaw. Do you want us just to review those against the sample bylaw and see if there's anything that's concerning?
Yep.
Or
Yeah.
then we could skip some of these other sections here regarding site design area standards and building design standards. Okay. So I'll do a comparison. Right now I have a table that compares your UMass Lowell West with the sample zoning, and we'll take a look at those things. Okay. So at that point, we will skip ahead to the affordability requirements, and I just want to confirm that I have heard from you that for now, at least for the immediate future, we're looking at a 10% requirement,
Yep,
with the understanding that that could change in the future.
yep.
As you understand what sort of development may occur under the overlay.
Yep.
Okay. And I know that, or would you want to, I guess the one other question is, would you want to allow a payment in lieu of affordable housing?
I would not.
No.
Okay,
We just don't
Okay.
have the infrastructure. We need the
Yeah,
units.
we've tried it and we have not had grand success with it.
I mean, we
I mean,
could,
if you don't have an affordable housing trust, I would recommend against it, because you need to have some sort
do.
of body that administers those
we
funds.
do, but we haven't made any units yet with that money, and we
Okay.
we almost went under 10% because
And especially if we're keeping it at 10%, I
Yeah.
would rather
Right.
not allow that.
the only exception to that I can see is that if a development is going to be less than 5 units, so if it was if it was 5 units or above, you'd round up to 1 unit, right? But if it was less than 5 units, then that would be the only situation I can imagine that I would personally want to
Maybe.
accept a donation to the PILO for a fractional amount of a unit, I guess.
Well, for that matter, we could define this so that all fractional amounts like that
Get paid in.
get paid in. I don't know, you can do it either way, I'm not, There's something to be said for rounding up.
I mean, I think that was a good solution, right? Because then you're still you're sort of precluding what a developer will sometimes do is hit just below where they have to round up, right? So you're at least then securing some sort of payment in lieu of for those proportionary units, and it does help your affordable housing trust.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can look at that language and add that to it.
Yeah.
All right. That is all that I had tonight. Is there any other questions? I know we will be coming back to you with a draft zoning amendment, and you'll be able to review that and provide comments.
I have one more question, which is the affordability. Are we able to stipulate, I saw in here 80% of the adjusted mean income. Is
That
that,
would be my recommendation. That is what the state requires, is the 80% of AMI. If you go lower than 80% AMI, then we would also need to do
Financial.
a financial analysis?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So is 80% acceptable to this board?
Yeah, I think I'd like to steer away from additional
If that's the
time
guidelines from the
time
DA.
constraining financial analyses at the moment.
Okay. I very much appreciate your time. I know this is a lot of decisions to make all in one hearing. So thank you very much. Thank you for reviewing all these materials, and we will be back with you in, I think, about a week, a little less than.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Have a great night.
You too.
You too. Okay, now we are on to the main meeting. I apologize for the delay to those of you waiting patiently. This is, we're gonna go to, next up is public input, which will be limited to issues not currently before the planning board. Is there anyone wishing to speak in public input? Or anyone, Evan in Zoom land?
No.
All right.
Okay. Then that being none, on to administrative review. We have the endorsement of the Mylars. That's just,
This, it's going to be presented to you, but
Oh,
you're
it is.
going to be voting on this A&R plan. I believe Melissa Robbins is with us.
Good evening, I am here.
we're ready, we hear you.
All right. Good evening, members of the board. For the record, Attorney Melissa Robbins from Farrell and Robbins. We're here tonight for an A&R endorsement. We're very excited that this is moving along. This A&R will carve off the lot so that we can convey it to Choice, and then will become a separate parcel, and they can start their affordable housing development. The A&R meets all requirements of the bylaw, and as you can see, it creates two parcels, parcels 1 and parcel 2. Happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Meets the requirements. I'll move. Need a motion? Move to approve the A&R with no determination as to zoning? Is that what we usually say, the magic
Yes.
word?
Of 255 Princeton Street, UMass West overlay district?
Yes, that's
I'll
the one I'm
second that.
referring to.
Okay, take it around.
Aye.
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 I'm an aye. Aye,
Yeah.
aye. And
Aye.
Anita in Zoom land?
Hey.
Okay,
Aye.
thank you. Anita's an
Thank you
aye.
very much, members of the board. I'll keep the board up to date on what the next steps will be.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, next up is administrative review and approval of proposed architectural revisions of 9 Acton Road. Am I correct? This is just a color change?
Now, some
They'll
stone front change too, a
Metal
little
roof.
bit.
Yeah, I made all these copies. I give them all.
Yep.
Well, that's good.
We can share that.
I got it all.
Yeah, I saw it already when it was sent
I
around.
saw it already. I'm good.
Good evening. My name is Bob Pace, and I'm one of the owners of 9 Acton Road. We purchased this land approved but unimproved, so we're doing the improvements, the building, the sales, and so on. After reading the decision, we had some questions, okay, on how it was approved, and want to make sure we just comply, okay? This shouldn't take more than, 3 or 4 minutes. We had some questions on the colors of the buildings. We had some questions on, we wanted to change a couple of things on the exterior. We wanted to add stone, okay, to the front, as shown on the rendering. We also added, instead of a roof with shingles on it, we wanted to put a metal roof over the garage. More upscaling the look of the building. The only thing wrong with the rendering, and I just noticed it, is there are black windows here. There are not white windows. There's white trim around them, but there should be black windows. That wasn't the decision. Okay, and we're planning to put black windows in there. Same grill patterns, so on and so forth. The real dilemma we have, was this plan approved with all the same color buildings? Were they dictated? I know there was supposed to be 3 colors in each building, which we've depicted, and we're going to use stone as well, if that's all right with the board.
Is your question, are all the buildings going to match each other?
Right.
Yes, I think that was my understanding. Did other people have a?
No, it would be nice, I don't know, Evan, while we're having this discussion, can we pull up the original rendering that they gave us when they went for a pool?
Yeah,
I think
I
you might be
have
the
that
quickest
attached.
one to get that. It'd be nice to just see what we approved. I mean, it's not like we get it right in front of us. But is this, Astrid, you mentioned the black windows.
So, yeah, the black windows
All
are
the
in the
white trim
decision.
gonna be black, or is it?
No,
it's white?
there's white trim around them, very similar to the Oddfellow building,
Okay.
with the white casing and the black insert windows.
What color metal roof are you putting on?
Black.
And just the roofing on the.
Just there, right.
Above the first level.
Correct. And this would have been siding for the lower level in the front. We want to put stone there,
Yeah.
which,
I think
It's
it's an
also-
improvement.
It's eminently reasonable to me, and this is a level of detail that I'm not sure we should really,
No, we don't, but that was a controversial project.
there were some
So
controversy
let's
there.
see what our decision was before we decide. Is that
That's the proposed,
what was the one we looked at?
right here. As Mike indicated, he didn't spend a lot of time on architecture.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I know we didn't.
Those differences to me are so minor.
Yeah.
I think it's
Just for what it's worth, the board didn't spend a lot of time on coloration. You may want to ask the developer what their preference is. The reason I say that is, if you go around town, 104 Turnpike, many of the other multifamily projects, there's some variation between buildings.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that.
No, I agree.
The only one that I'm aware of that was not well received was Beaver Brook at Hunt and Littleton, which was a 40B. People thought that the coloration was, I guess, too modern,
too bold.
maybe Cambridge-y like.
Much.
I don't know.
But this particular site is really visible, so it may, depending on the coloration,
Yeah.
it could be an improvement.
Yeah, and the development that's out on Route 40 is the exact same for every single building, so that it draws attention to that there's no variation on that, in that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, the applicant mentioned it, but he didn't provide
Yeah.
any, you may want to ask him what his thoughts are.
Yeah, what's your preference?
well, as you can see on the, can you go back?
You can go back to
Go
his.
back to the old one?
Original one? one of the things that we wanted to eliminate was this white, this is a maintenance issue, this is a condominium. Okay, that's not siding. Okay, we wanted to be a maintenance-free building. So as you could see,
Yeah, see what you've done.
we put some siding there that is different, okay, but basically broke it up with the stone on the bottom. We're trying to make this a more upscale
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like.
building than what was approved.
Is your intent to have the same building, cluster of buildings look the same, or are you gonna deviate different?
We'd like to do like an earth tone in brown and like a gray with a two-tone gray and some stone, and move them around as
So one building would be kind of the opposite mirror image of the
Right.
colors?
right. So there are three buildings on one side, they're all the same, so the one in the middle would be the one that would match the unit building, and then we'd have the same colored building on the duplex. It would just,
But it would basically be the same color scheme, but maybe just different gradations?
One's gonna be a brown tone, one's gonna be a gray tone. Okay,
Yeah, it's
same type of,
Yeah.
my there was a big accident down on on 495 about an hour ago. He's stuck in traffic, I was bringing you the color samples, he's got them. He may come running in here.
So what you're suggesting is, I think there's 5, 6, 7 buildings.
Right. And
You-
we said
you-
we wanna
You want to
do
do
two colors.
2 colors and they'll just
rather-
alternate.
You know, we're not
So
looking
that
at.
side by, no building side by side will be the exact same color.
Identical.
Yeah, I think that makes great sense.
Yeah, perfect.
It was unclear, I didn't want, you know, I didn't want to start siding and have somebody say, look, why did you get this cleared? Okay, I mean, to me, it looks like these are minor changes that I typically wouldn't bring in front of the board.
We appreciate it.
I read the decision, so it was pointed in some direction and ambiguous in others, I thought. So we asked Evan, he said, look, why don't you just run it by the board?
Yeah, I think that seems quite reasonable, personally. Should we,
Evan, my only concern is the metal roof, based on stormwater.
Yeah, so do you recall if the existing roof above the garage,
Was a shingled roof.
did you recall if they had gutters on that portion above
I
the,
don't believe it did. I don't believe it
it
did.
wasn't going to a dry well or anything?
If it does, it'll still have gutters.
Okay, so what do you want to do with that information?
Well, metal roof is nominally cleaner for the runoff. than
But the
shingle.
stormwater regs require that if it's in zone 2, it's gotta go into
So
BMPs.
let me just, so the project is in Zone 2, and just so we clarify this, whether, regardless of what kind of roof it is, in Zone 2, it required treatment. Is
Right.
that-
Okay.
So we can either assume that the original approval required the treatment, or we can put a condition on it. But I think it's safe to assume, this was peer reviewed, that the original approval required treatment. But if you're not comfortable with that, then, you can condition it that they're not adding roofs, they're just changing the
Right.
material.
Whatever was approved before, we want to adhere to. Okay, I don't want to go back to approvals. Okay, I want to build what's here. I believe, okay, that it probably does have gutters, okay, and water infiltrates through some kind of drywall. But I can't state that emphatically.
How many garages are there on the total of the project?
18.
I don't know if there's a threshold under stormwater for if you're over or under a roof area.
I'm not seeing any.
Thought I read 1,000 square feet.
Like I said, in this case where they're not adding the roof, they're just changing the materials, it sounds like the stormwater standard doesn't change. It's a zone 2, it required treatment.
I'll approve it.
All right, make a motion to approve the proposed architectural revisions at 9 Acton Road.
I will second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 You got it.
John, you are also an aye.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so the town manager, the town meeting recently approved the town to create a strategic, to hire a strategic planner, and to, in concert with that, to put together a strategic plan steering committee. And the town manager had sent out a letter requesting that a member of the planning board be tasked with serving on that committee. It sounded like from the select board meeting the other night, they're expecting it to meet, well, I guess they'll determine how often they're gonna meet once they are formed. But it sounded like that maybe once a month. And so I guess if, I wanted to know if anyone has a particular interest in serving on the strategic plan steering committee?
Well, I'm going to get to appoint somebody for it anyway.
You're gonna what?
I'll get to appoint somebody anyway, so if somebody else is interested. AgCom gets to appoint one also.
AgCom is not on this one.
That's because I got a note from Paul.
Okay.
So I assume he was looking to the AgCom, in which I'll be glad to take it.
That may be for Coolis.
You know, I think it is for Coolis, right?
There's lots of new committees being formed.
Yeah,
as we
I'm
speak.
losing track. Okay, yeah, I'll be glad to take a shot if nobody else wants it.
Anyone else interested?
Perfect, Mike's the man.
Okay,
Okay,
We just get a vote on that?
I'll take a motion to appoint,
Motion to appoint Mike Raisback to the Strategic Planning Steering Committee representing the planning board.
okay.
Second that?
okay, Mike moved, Paul seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye, I guess I'll say
Is
aye.
also an aye. So it's unanimous, okay. Continued public hearings, we'll go on to our rules and policies, which I watched the recording of the last meeting, where it looked like am I on the wrong thing?
No, I don't know. An updated one?
It looked like you guys just pretty much dispensed with that and approved the,
We did approve the policies as where they are right now. We still have to work on the next,
4 point.
what's the next group we have to work on?
Well, there was one more, I forget what it was.
It was the,
It was the last one.
The
Parking.
bonding?
Yeah.
And the
So that was the
parking,
only
did you
one
guys
left.
decide 200, 500? Was that determined? Okay.
yes.
So I'm in the process of finishing all the edits and putting it in final form so I can send it out. And then we could probably post it on our website.
I think for tonight, we're looking for a continuance to December 13th. Because this also has a hearing for the site plan special permit rules and regulations, which Joel is going to get to at some point.
You're gonna do that, Joel?
Oh, he volunteered.
I missed that.
But that was a while ago.
So this is it's just a ongoing public hearing until we get to it.
I actually
Okay.
make a
Things come
motion to
back to haunt
continue
you.
the public hearing on the site plan and special permit rules and regulations and policies. and procedures.
Gotcha, okay. I was surprised to see this on here, because I thought it was done, but that
Second.
makes sense.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
okay.
Anita?
say aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Twisting our arm. Okay, now we are to 270 Billrica Road.
I think we're looking for a
Looking for an
continuance
update.
to November 14th, which is upcoming Tuesday, the joint meeting with the Conservation Commission Planning Board to hear an update from the working group.
Okay, we're not going to hear any update tonight.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Does that require a motion to continue?
Please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anita's an aye. Okay. 10 Hildreth Street,
Okay.
requesting a 6-lot definitive subdivision approval and applicable waivers.
Good evening. For the record, Brian Gaudreau with Hancock Associates, along with Michael Lefevre with Property Possible, Attorney Hausler, and also we have Scott Thornton with VAI. They are our traffic consultant on this, and he's on Zoom. So I think the goal for this evening is to drill down and hopefully agree upon a scope for a traffic study so we can release VAI to begin that. Attorney Hauser and myself are here if there are any topics that the board would like to speak to. Otherwise,
Microphone. Sorry, I'm
apologize. So, did you hear? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Essentially, we're here to answer questions outside of traffic, but I think we want to focus primarily on traffic this evening. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Scott. And we had submitted kind of our scoping document, and he's prepared to go through that and kind of answer questions.
Thanks, Brian. Members of the board, thank you very much for the opportunity to present via Zoom. I was at a wedding over the weekend and picked up a bit of COVID, so I'm housebound for a while. But I'd be happy to go through what we plan to study for the traffic assessment that's proposed for Hildreth Street. So we're very concerned, obviously, with safety for the existing residents and also for those of the proposed development. So we had identified sort of an expanded traffic impact assessment that would have us looking at existing conditions in terms of traffic volumes, roadway geometrics, including cross sections or the width of the roadway, the numbers of driveways and residences along the streets in the study area, which are really comprised of Hildreth Street and Plum Street and Perham Street, just to kind of round out the area. We would also get an idea of the volumes of users, so the numbers of vehicles going in and out of these streets, their speeds, the numbers of pedestrians, the numbers of bicyclists. We also want to get an idea of the speed that the vehicles are moving at. And I think that may be that's usually a major concern of folks in a neighborhood. We also want to, so we would get some speed measurements on some of the streets. We would also look to get sight distances along Hildreth and Plum Street, just to make sure that the adequate distances are being provided for motorists coming through the area. We also would look to get intersection counts of the intersections of Billrica Road with Hildreth Street, and I think it's Perham Street, but also Plum Street with Hildreth Street. I know at the end of Plum Street where it starts to turn into Perham Street, it's kind of an intersection, but not really. So we just want to get an idea of the overall volume that's going through there. We would do those counts on the typical critical time periods, which are the weekday morning peak hours and the weekday afternoon peak hours. I understand there may be some concern about school-related impacts. We could expand the afternoon time period to capture the school bus drop-off period, which is probably in the 2 to 3 o'clock time period, so we could expand those counts to go from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. if the board thought that was relevant. And then I think once we get an idea of what the current, for lack of a better term, traffic profile is on these streets and at the intersections, we can look to identify the impact of the project on a delay and a vehicle queue basis for looking at the full development of 6 duplex units, 12 units total. We're not looking at a lot of traffic generation based on ITE numbers. It's somewhere between 6 and 7 peak hour vehicle trips with a percentage of those entering and a percentage of those exiting, depending on the relevant time period. So, but we would look to, this part would be a standard assessment where we would project 7 years out from the 2023 condition, get an idea of any other background development that's in the area, include that all together, add the traffic increases from the project, and see what the effect of the project is on these intersections. Then we can, that'll help to inform the review of what mitigation is appropriate out there. If for instance, if excessive speed is an issue, we may, I know the town has a number of vertical cross-section elements, some speed humps might be appropriate. There may be some signage that might be appropriate. There's a number of different traffic calming devices that are solar powered. For instance, solar powered pedestrians ahead signs with LEDs. We can set them so they only go off in the evening. We can set them so they only go off during the day or 24 hours. So I think there's a number of things that we can do. Oh, and not least of which is the review of any crash statistics in the area, particularly the intersections along with Bill Ricker Road, as well as inside the neighborhood. So I might have gone a little fast. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, but that's kind of what we're thinking about for the safety and traffic review.
Anybody have any
Well,
questions?
okay, I think all the things that you've listed and have here on the report, on the proposal are spot on. What I do want to make sure of is that we're talking about the proper scope of streets. I notice we've got Plum, Pelham, and Hildreth. Do we need to go a little farther than that?
I think it's, I think it depends on what the objective is. I think if you start looking at a further or a larger study area, you may be reducing the impact of the project, just because we would want to, if we include Grove Street, for instance, we would most likely send traffic out there to get an idea of what the effect of the traffic would be on those locations. And that may in turn diminish the effect and the mitigation on some of these other streets. But we could look at Grove Street if that's if that's the will of the board.
That was kind of the one that I was thinking of in particular.
Okay.
But going beyond that probably doesn't make a huge amount of difference. You can project a lot of the rest of it from knowing what's going on on 129 at those two intersections.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Chris?
I've got a bunch of questions and suggestions. On bullet 1, for the physical and operating information, I would recommend removing Hildreth specifically on those last 2 bullets. And I would actually like to see all of those sub-bullets done for Hildreth, Plum, Grove, and Perham. So all of the streets in that scope should have all of those conditions looked at. The speed limits, the operating parameters, the volumes. The question I had on the traffic volume sub-bullet, is that over the course of the full day, or is it only for the scope of times listed below?
So typically, it's for the peak hours that occur during in the morning. So it's typically it occurs between 7 and 9, and in the afternoon it occurs between 4 and 6.
Okay. So for the hours, I would recommend 7 to 9:30 and 2 to 6, because the school hours are 8:59 to 3:18. And so my guess is that people would be going a little early to park and wait for their kids and then going later.
Yep.
Also, for the roadway geometrics, would that study also include how snowbanks impact the geometrics of the roadways?
I mean, we typically look at that to see if there's an area where snow could be plowed into, where snowbanks could form, or snow windrows is the technical term, where those are likely to accumulate. That's part of our site distance review. We'd like to look at the intersections and where, how the site triangles map out.
Okay.
And that will be included in that review.
So, but I would like to see the snowbanks looked at on the regular roadways because of the narrow roadways, not just at the intersections. Because there's
Okay.
not much room to move the snowbanks beyond the roadways to in there.
Okay.
The intersections under bullet 2, I would also like to see Grove and 129 added. And I'm not sure why Plum and Perham is in there, because it's not really an intersection, it's just a curve.
Right.
So
Right.
you could probably remove that one.
We could remove that if we're adding the other ones of Grove Street.
Yeah. And then for all of the other bullets, except for the specific intersection ones, I'm assuming all of that, so the pedestrian and bike routes, traffic volumes, crash data, all of that would be for each of those roads in scope?
Yes.
Okay. And then the trip generation, I understand traditionally you would use the ITE trip generator, but because of the unique location of this area, this neighborhood next to a school, can I recommend that we use current data and then extrapolate based on the percent units increase? So look at the number of units that are currently there, look at the traffic patterns, the numbers, the vehicle counts, and then look to see this project would increase the number of units by so much percent, and then use that percent increase to increase the traffic volumes.
Yeah, I think that with the, since we'd be looking at all of the intersections that feed into this neighborhood, we could definitely do that. We would have that data. It's probably not going to be much different than the ITE data, but we'll have that data, so we can certainly run those calculations.
Okay.
Good.
And then on the analysis conditions, you mentioned existing conditions 2023. I would also like to see 2023 conditions with the project. So the existing 2023 with the project unmitigated, and 2023 with the project mitigated.
I think that's all laid out there.
No, it's 2030.
Yeah, so it says 2030.
It's not
Yeah,
current.
DOT guidelines are for 7 years plus existing, so we typically would look at 2023 and 2030
Okay.
right now.
But the 2023 you have here is only the existing conditions. You don't have it
Correct.
listed with the other.
Correct. That's just standard DOT procedure.
So yeah, I would like to see those other two conditions added to that.
Other two conditions, 2023 plus the build traffic, and what was the other one?
2023 with the project unmitigated, and 2023 with the project mitigated,
Okay.
so we can see the differences.
Yeah.
And then for the last, or second to the last bullet, the off-site roadway improvements. No, sorry, the on-site vehicle pedestrian circulation vehicle queuing. I would like to see that also done, not just for the site, but also for the entire study area. So off-site
Yeah.
as well. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that we have that as well. I mean, that'll
Okay.
be part of the output.
Good.
Okay. That's all I've got.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that kind of rounds out the requirements pretty well.
Mike Walsh?
No, I only had two, and then he took care of them, so we're good.
No further additions that I have.
Nothing. I have a couple of questions. That is, are you going to be conducting a road study audit?
A road safety audit?
Yeah, road safety audit, yeah.
Yeah, so we will be pulling a lot of the items that are in a road safety audit. It's typically, the thing is, a road safety audit, as defined by DOT, is really a review of crash data and crash trends and ways to mitigate those. In this case, we're really looking at what I imagine to be. I'm not trying to prejudge the outcome, but my guess is we're really looking at a traffic calming study, because I think that which is, and this is more comprehensive than just a road safety audit. If we don't have a lot of crashes, and my guess is we're not going to find a lot of crashes on Hildreth Street or Plum Street or Perham or Grove Street. They typically occur at the intersections, but that's not in the neighborhood. So I don't think that there would be a lot of countermeasures that would be suggested or that would be warranted, because we wouldn't have crashes to try to mitigate. But I think the traffic calming portion of the study will look at speeds, we'll look at the sight distances, we'll look at queuing at all of the intersections and the delays that are there now, that are there in the future, that are there with the project, without the project. And I think that provides a better idea of where to go, what would be the next step to try to address the impact of the project.
Okay, the sort of what was the origin of the desire for a traffic study is that in our subdivision rules and regulations, one of the things that we evaluate is whether there is an unwarranted traffic hazard because of the introduction of the subdivision. And there was some concern that because essentially we're doubling the number of living units more or less on the street, on Hildreth, that was going to create what we would consider, or what someone might call, an unwarranted traffic hazard. So I'm trying to, so my question to you is, how would we use the results of this study to determine whether there is an unwarranted traffic hazard or a warranted traffic hazard?
So if I would think that if the impacts from the project are, if there are glaring effects or glaring increases in delays, or a vehicle queue that goes from 4 vehicles to 8 or something like that, I think that might be the type of condition that you're looking at. And again, this is without having done any of the counts or of the analysis. So but I think that might help you to identify the condition that you're speaking of.
Well, I mean, because the main concern was pedestrian safety because of the narrowness of the road and because of the school on the other side of the street and residents reporting that, yeah, it is a street that gets pedestrian traffic on it. And so in that case, I wouldn't expect that queuing of vehicles was going to necessarily be a significant factor for pedestrian safety, but certainly the narrowness of the road and the speed of the vehicles, I think, would be. And so, that would be something that I think that we would want to have some idea as to what is the results of this that's going to help us be able to make some sort of assessment as to, how much of a traffic hazard it poses. And I'm pretty sure that vehicle queuing is not going to be one of those things.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand that.
Okay.
The vehicle queuing was just one example. It could be the volumes of pedestrians that are increased due to the project. It could be, we'll have the roadway geometric information. We'll have the cross-sectional width, the available area for pedestrians to walk on the streets. So I think we will have a lot of that information.
Okay, thank you.
Joel, was this study going to count pedestrians? Or is it just looking at?
It should.
Yes.
Scott, it was to.
Yes.
intended to
Yes.
count?
We'll have pedestrians included in there.
Okay. And that's a manual? You don't
I
use
assume
it.
that's a manual.
You don't use a tube for that, correct?
No.
Correct. Right. And
it should be done on the school
typically,
day.
what we do, these days with technology, we don't have people out at the intersections counting anymore. We have, we have small cameras up there, very unobtrusive. They're installed the day before the counts are done, and they're removed the day after, and that's how we get the data. And that includes, all users. It'll include the cars, the trucks, buses, pedestrians, bicyclists, school buses, although there probably aren't any that go down through the neighborhood, but it includes all those users.
Yeah, and I don't think you heard the board member, Mike Walsh, say that he wanted to be sure you did it on a school day. So we wanted a day that school is in session.
We'll make sure that we check with the school department, so we have the school calendar, and we don't want any early release or, it should be just a standard day.
Great, thank you.
Is that it, Joel?
That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Anita? Did you have anything, further questions or comments?
Nope, not that.
So, this is a,
Still a public meeting, so I don't
Public
know.
meeting?
Does he have anything else to present tonight? No.
Well, I did have one question, but go ahead. Go ahead if you want to. Well, and that was last time that we met. There was, I asked the question of whether any due diligence, Chapter 21E testing had been done on the property, and the answer was no. And so then I asked if that was something that they would consider, and I think that they did ask, and the answer was no, that they did not want to do it, if that's correct. That's correct. And so then I wanted to raise that as an issue for us to consider as to whether, I guess the board should give some indication as to whether that you're okay with that there is not 21E testing done, or whether you feel that the applicant should conduct 21E Phase 1. I did check. I didn't know how much they cost, so I did do a quick check. They cost somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. I guessed $5,000. I was overestimated. But the reason for that was, of course, because of reports from residents about activities on the site. I think someone actually asked Paul if he thought that something's been going on the site, and I think you thought that there were, although I don't think that was very specific at all. But,
I did live right here on, at 72 Barica, and I did notice activity, but couldn't pinpoint what was going on.
right. So and the fact that, because it is a sensitive site, both because it's aquifer protection, also because it's a sensitive environmental site and so forth, was a reason why it was raised in the first place. So one thing that I had asked is whether the board was going to consider this information that they felt they needed for a decision, and that if they didn't receive it, they would deny for lack of information. And so I think that's something that we should, the sooner the better, give an indication to the applicant as to where the board stands on that.
What was the name of the test? What was
It's called, well, technically it's an ASTM test, and I don't remember what but it's referred to as a Chapter 21E Phase 1.
Chapter 21.
1E Phase 1, which Chapter 21E is the MCP, the Massachusetts contamination, something like that. But
So
anyway,
they
it's
go
for
out and do
it's for-
samples, and they test the.
That would
the
actually occur at
soil?
Phase 2. So you do a Phase 1, which is why they're not very expensive, because what you do is you look at historical areas, you examine previous records on the site, you might even interview people in the neighborhood or what have you. You may go on the site itself, just to give some sort of assessment as to whether you think that there are potential environmental concerns on the site, and if so, then you would at that point then the board, that information we brought to us, and then we would determine whether we felt like there was a Phase 2 that was required. But the Phase 2 is where you would actually get into the testing and so forth and so on, and those tend to be more expensive and so forth and so on. But for the purpose of our environmental information report, I felt that at least to have a Phase 1 done so that we could get some sort of assessment as to whether there was any likelihood of anything being there was something that would be prudent for us to have in the report. So that.
Okay, so one more so, but you're proposing that the proponent pay for that?
Correct.
So, but is that something that the town would not cover? I mean, whoever pays for the report kind of gets the report results.
Right.
So is that something that the town should take up? And if it's so close to the aquifer protection, and if there's this, what's happening on site there, wouldn't the town have interest in doing the report versus the proponent who doesn't want to do the report? And then,
Then who would
The
pay for the
results.
Phase 2?
I don't know, I'm just saying, I mean,
Yeah.
the results are gonna be dictated by whoever is paying for the report.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting question.
I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, just,
Yeah, I'm just used to the
happens.
idea of applicant comes for a permit, or in this case,
Yeah, I
a
know, I agree.
subdivision, and then they usually do whatever is required in order to satisfy.
okay.
I didn't know if you wanted to comment on the town paying for it. or
The
not.
town's definitely not going to pay for work on private property, particularly where, as Joel said, they're in front of the board for a permit to do, what they're proposing to do.
No,
think
but but all I'm saying is because it's so close to the aquifer, which is a town issue.
So I think what Joel's alluding to is the town's regulatory authority and the planning board's regulatory authority provides some jurisdiction on those issues. So I think Joel's asking, to what extent does the board need that information to make that determination within the subdivision control approval criteria?
No, I understand.
Especially where one of our criteria is establishing that there's no no environmental hazard associated with the subdivision. And so that's sort of what at least in my opinion gives us the legs to ask for that.
Want to hear from the applicant?
I want to make sure the board's questions are out first, or comments.
Well, I guess one of my thoughts on this is that it's once again an area of aquifer protection that I feel it's not quite crystal clear, the jurisdiction and whose jurisdiction is it to determine, like, should there be samples taken? If so, where? I don't know. in the interest of aquifer protection, if, I assume that's something that the DPW would weigh in on, I'm not sure how they would weigh in on it. If we were, we have town engineers, I think 8 of them, or something. I mean, I assume that if we are going further with assessing the site, that they would be, in the interest of aquifer protection, there would be some need for either the water department or the DPW, town engineers, or someone else to do, I mean, I don't know how much, I don't know how satisfied I'm gonna be with a phase 1, even if it's reassuring, because of the proximity to the aquifer.
Yeah,
So
I
that
mean-
being the case, I'm not sure if I necessarily want to throw money at that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess if it shows there's definitely area for concern, then that is helpful information.
Yeah, I just want to quickly interject. It's not strictly aquifer protection. I mean, in this case, what we're talking about is a site where we just want to confirm that before we allow a subdivision to go in, that there isn't contamination there that's going to be a potential issue for the residents of that subdivision or the
Right.
people doing the construction they're exposed to it, what have you.
Right, but how is that normally determined?
It's not within the context of what Joel's referring to. It could be within the context of subdivision control, and it certainly could be within the context of aquifer protection. Let's assume the board wasn't inclined, and then the question is, well, what other town board or entity? So as you recall, this project has triggered the Board of Health's aquifer protection new SOP.
Right.
The applicants can speak to in more detail. I don't know to what extent it requires testing for hazardous material. If it does, well, then presumably we're covered. Within the confines of the planning board's jurisdiction, we could reach out to the DPW and ask them their opinion. My suggestion is that they work best with directives given by the planning board, and then they provide their input. But I think it'd be good to clarify at this point, to what extent the Board of Health process is testing for any contaminants. And I just don't know that answer. Maybe the applicant does, and Brian in particular, I think he's very engaged in that process.
So the last couple of hearings, I kind of described the process that we're going through right now with the Board of Health. So we're in the groundwater protection zone, GPZ, and as a part of that, we have to file with the Board of Health because we have a project within it, and the Board of Health referred us to the Chelmsford Water Department to understand what their concerns are with the public water supply. So we went back and forth with Chelmsford Water Department to develop a scope of study, and that scope is to install 3 monitoring wells that have already been done. The groundwater sampled and sent off to an independent lab for specific constituents. The Water Department had a rather comprehensive list on things that they were interested in, whether it was nutrients, whether it was total suspended solids, VOCs, PFAS is a big concern right now. So samples were sent off to the lab. In addition, those monitoring wells have been recorded as the public water supply wells were actively pumping to understand what the influence of this site would have on those wells. The report is almost at the level of being issued, and I've already expressed to the board that we would issue it to you as well as the Board of Health and the Chelmsford Water Department. So when this topic came up the last time, regarding a phase 1 and the fact that it really is a desktop analysis, we were already going through a very detailed process because of the GPZ, and we feel that covers in far greater depth than what a phase 1 would showcase.
So was the phase 1 done for?
No.
Okay. So how were the locations of those test locations picked?
With the Chelmsford Water Department and their consultant.
Okay. So that's my concern, is that that's a big property, and if you don't do a phase 1 to know where potential contaminants might be, all of those tests might have potentially missed any contaminants that might be on that property. The phase one, from what I understand, Joel can correct me if I'm wrong, the phase one study uses the aerials to see where potential contaminants might be, and then that information is potentially used to determine the location of any testing.
Well, do we know anything about what the water department used as criteria for picking those well locations? And do we need to ask that question, or can we consider that their judgment, being somewhat more in the business, might be sufficient?
Well, I mean, my question is, the samples that you refer to, those are, I assume those are water samples.
Correct.
So those are not soil samples?
They are not.
Okay, so, I mean, I would
That's
fully
another-
trust the Chelmsford Water District to pick good locations, or to
Test
good
the water.
locations for water sampling. Yeah, but we're also talking about soil sampling,
Mm-hmm.
potentially, or in other words, that there is a potential for soil contamination, and the GPZ stuff is not going to be looking for that.
Do we have reason to believe that there might be a problem up there? I mean, I'm hesitant to require a party to expend money when there's not really a modestly well-defined good reason for it, other than we just like to know. I mean, do we have a reason to think there might be a problem?
Reports of automotive repair.
Yeah, okay, automotive repair, I mean, unless it's by the tens and hundreds, yeah, theoretically, somebody could dump
Just one car working on one car. but-
yeah, one car, and you dump some oil, and that's probably happened in every single lot in Chelmsford at one time or another. We don't like it, but is that enough to trigger
I also
somebody
looked
into
at,
doing a
I
phase
also
one?
looked on the GIS site at some of the older aerials.
Yeah,
and
that's
there's a
probably
lot
very
of stuff back there
Yeah,
in some of the old pictures. So, and it's hard to tell what it is.
yeah, that's,
So,
those things are hard to.
Given that and the neighbors' complaints, to me, that's
Yeah,
enough of a
I also
concern.
have an independent confirmation that at least there was a lot of, at least was described to me as unusual, crazy stuff going on back there. So, so is it not?
Unusual, crazy stuff going on everywhere.
Well,
But if somebody were to say, you
Sleepy
know,
little town
I've seen 10 rusted metal drums back there,
Yeah.
then I'd get worried.
Yeah.
But nobody has reported to me that anything like that has been seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm,
Just to close this loop, and if you recall, we did it, that when this initially came up, I think the board had asked me to forward this inquiry or comment to the Board of Health and Building Commissioner.
right.
They looked at their files, I think they even went out on the site. So there was nothing historically reported to the town
Okay.
on this site related to a complaint or an inquiry.
That doesn't mean,
No.
Oh, it doesn't mean it
If
can't
people are
have
doing
happened.
something illegal, they're not gonna come and necessarily pull a permit for it.
But I'm just within the context of, is there any
And-
past data?
Any
or-
re-
right.
Yeah.
That
Like
was
I
held
said,
by the same family
looking-
forever.
looking at those old aerials, there's a lot of stuff back there in some
What
of
does
the
that
old
mean? What
photos.
kind
What does a lot of stuff mean?
It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell.
That's part of the problem. Is that
Houses, cars.
there's
I mean,
it looked
we're
like a
talking about,
track.
we're talking about where we have questions, we're talking about something that's like 2 to 3K to have someone else come back and say, yeah, you know, I looked at it, I've been in the business, it's nothing, so you're okay.
Yeah.
That's all we're saying. I mean, if the board wants to say, you know, hey, we can get reports that there was, you know, car repair going on there, you know, of a scale that you'd be concerned about, that there's, you know, aerials that you go, well, you know, there's things that I don't expect to normally see on a property and that sort of thing. But, and say, well, you know, that's fine. The boards can certainly do that, right? But to me, it's not a very big ask
Right.
to do a phase one. I mean, if it was like $15,000, $10,000, it'd say, that's a little bit much, but. you
And
know.
we're not asking,
Right,
it's
no.
not an ask for phase two right now. It's just a phase one.
I mean, I fully expect it's gonna come back and say, yeah, you know, there was whatever, but it's no worse than anywhere else, so don't worry about it. So I just would like to be a little bit more, exercising a little more, care in these things, especially when we have reports of things going on.
Okay. God bless you.
Excuse me.
You really don't have, you have verbal stories. You don't have documented reports. So let's keep the record very straight. And just because we have undefined stuff on a property is not sufficient to put another requirement on an applicant. Nor does your board regulations allow or mandate a 21E study. It's not in your regulations. Now, to help that, the client has already agreed to do a fairly significant amount of work to supply you with data that's going to probably confirm that there's no issue. You've had the Board of Health is investigating this because they're checking on it because there are septic systems involved. So they're going to be involved and they're going to review it. And if any board has maybe the right to do that, it would be the Board of Health. It's not this board. And I have never seen this board mandate a phase one of a subdivision or residential subdivision based on hearsay from neighbors. That's a huge leap and one that should not be entered into too quickly. So you're getting what you really want through other boards, and you're getting the Board of Health involved. You have them doing their studies. You have the Water District doing its studies. And then the last safety valve for you, if you're really that concerned, is the client is more likely than not going to go for financing. And when the client goes for financing, it's going to require, the most lenders require a phase one. And if there's a problem, the licensed site professional who performs the phase one is mandatorily obligated to disclose that and to report it. So you're covered 6 ways to Sunday on this.
Yeah, but I'd rather have that now. And
You're not
sometime
entitled
from
to
now,
it.
because
Let me
we're
be
also
clear,
going through
Joel.
a process
You're
at
not
270
entitled
Billerica
to
done.
it.
And at 270 Billerica, we didn't find out
You're
until
not
afterward.
entitled to it as a matter of jurisdiction. You're not.
Oh, I don't
It's
think-
that
I
simple.
disagree.
You can disagree, and that's one vote,
do
and I
disagree,
understand that.
Because, well,
That's
actually,
fine.
it's no vote, but, because I'm associate member. But nonetheless, the subdivision rules and regulations, one of the things that we're to make sure of is
Yes.
that there aren't any environmental hazards.
And can you name another
So for
subdivision,
our
residential
way of
subdivision where that's been
ascertaining that
done?
Could involve asking you, for your applicant, to $2,000 to $3,000 to
No, you,
help assure the
if you
board
want to
that
spend the
when
money,
we
the
are
town can
environmentally
spend the money.
We're not
You
gonna
can't
argue
spend my
this.
client's money.
Excuse me, we're not going to argue this
Yeah,
back and forth with you.
I understand that.
Mr. Hausler.
It's,
Okay,
how far is the board going to go on this?
okay, Mr. Hausler,
We'll find out.
we're going to find that out when we discuss it amongst ourselves, not with you.
Well, you're going to close this portion of the public hearing, or is it going to be left open so we can rebut things that are said in this commentary?
I think we probably have to because we're only listening to one piece of the story tonight. So this public hearing is going to have to stay open.
Right.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The answer to the request is we won't do it.
Okay,
I think you got that.
Thank you.
But can I ask a question? Can we require it now? Should we take a vote whether or not we should require it? Since they're going to spend the money anyways?
I'm not.
I personally would like to know what,
Wouldn't it be preemptive for the financing if you really think you're going for financing?
The-
Why such a big fight?
Because the
It's a
lender will
principle.
choose the person that's doing it, not this board, or my client.
Okay.
So it's redundant.
I personally would like to see what the Board of Health is doing and if they're doing soil sampling, and if so, based on what criteria, prior to making a decision about whether we should
Even
require a 21E.
And I would make another request. I think this is a spot, I think Attorney Hausler's made some interesting points here. We probably should find out from our counsel just exactly what the scope of our power is in this area. I mean, if we don't have any power here, then let's go
Yeah, that's what we
find
had.
another fish to fry.
Yeah, that's what we, actually, that's what we had said last time.
I did, and we have not heard.
We thought Paul was going to be here, but then
That didn't
Paul
happen.
ended up being at the one before, not this one. So-
I
Okay,
will email Paul.
okay, if you can just get a fast
All right,
answer
you
to
want
that.
to, want to table this item for now?
Yes, I
Yeah.
would like to table this item for now. Okay, and now,
Did you want Evan to initiate, to contact the Board of Health about
yeah.
some
if you-
sort of input from them as to what they're doing?
Okay.
Okay. Just wanted to close that one, too. All right, thanks.
So now we have tabled that item, but we still have public input to hear,
And do we,
unless we have further discussion amongst ourselves first. Anita, did you have anything else? Did you have an opportunity? Okay. I think everyone had their shot at it. Okay, we're gonna open up the public input.
Good evening. Pat Marassi, 15 Plum Street. Came before you once prior. Today I'll just be focusing on the traffic study that we just heard about. I had a few concerns with that. A few of them have already been addressed by Mr. LaValle. Thank you very much. In terms of the time periods, I know you talked about maybe 2 to 6 or 3 to 6. And we do have the school that starts at that ends at 3:18, but also the middle school ends at 2:40. So I do think that 2 to 6 would be a better time period.
Good point.
There was a little concern. It appeared on the part of Van Ness and Associates when the question of snow and how that would impact the geometrics could be accounted for. Seemed like they weren't really sure how that would be done. So I would propose to them, if they can't calculate that in any way, then simply do measurements when there isn't snow and when there is a significant amount of snow. The numbers that were given, I believe they were all well below realistic numbers. So I understand that they came from a website, they were calculated, probably didn't, I don't know how they calculated, but I'm guessing they didn't account for the size of these buildings. They're quite large. The average house on Hildreth Street is 1.5 stories. These are most likely 3-story buildings. They're expensive, and the location is important as well. So what we've seen is that families that are moving to these are not single person, right? There are a lot of cars involved at these homes. And so my neighbor Linda and I went to Gallagher Square this morning, and we sat and we observed Bernard Lane. Now, as many of you know, Bernard Lane is almost touching this property, and it is very similar, except it has 10 units instead of 12. So we sat out there this morning, and we counted from 7 to 9, the time period that's being proposed. Using this website to get the calculations, 6 vehicles traveling either in or out from 7 to 9. 6 vehicles. We counted 15. 5 in, 10 out. That's for 10 units instead of 12. So multiplied by 1.2, going from 10 to 12, 18. Triple what the estimate was. Exactly triple. I applied the same extrapolation rate to the total for a day, which gave me, instead of 41, 123. This is from today. We only checked once. Picked today because the meeting was today. Okay? So it was just a random weekday. So again, instead of 41 vehicles, 123 vehicles. I really don't think it sounds like that big of a number when we consider that most of these buildings have 3, maybe 2, but a lot of them have 3 vehicles on each side. So we're talking 30 plus vehicles, 120, that's in and out twice a day. It's really not that much. In fact, I think 41 is really doesn't make any sense, because that means each car is not even coming and going once. So I'll pass these numbers on to you. Also, I noticed that there was no mention of traffic or roadblocks during construction. Where are all these vehicles going to be during the construction? When there's been work done on this street before, you can't get down the street during construction, and I imagine this is going to be a lengthy time period, so I'd like to see that added to the study as well. Last thing is that we saw 2 buses stop at the end of Bernard Lane. They didn't go down Bernard Lane to pick up students. One at the middle school pickup time, one at the elementary school pickup time. So where are these buses going to be parking if this is off of Hildreth Street? Please take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
Hello, Paul Wood, 16 Hildreth Street. I just want to touch on a few things Pat said. I agree with everything he said, but the traffic study also, I come back from the gym every day around 6:30 in the morning, and the top of Perm, there's half a dozen, well, no, there's 4 or 5 kids waiting for the high school bus. They go even earlier. So I'd like to even see that time, and I leave for work at before 7 a lot of times, and so does my wife's a school teacher. I know there's other teachers. We're going up the road at 7 o'clock. So I think I'd even like to have that, say, that morning time pushed up, incorporate a little more earlier. That's all. But the other thing I wanted to touch on was, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I only have one set of these. I'll pass these around. It's a picture of Bernard Lane. Again, it's very comparable going in there, even slightly less. And you look at the parking situation going on there. And that's something we mentioned, I think, a few meetings ago. Hildreth Street cannot take any overflow from that street. And if you look at that, you can't get anything up that road right now. You know, they're having a party or something there, but they're going to live there. I understand that. I want the kids to live there. They're going to be part of Hildreth Street. All those kids, potentially, I think it's 2.5 kids per household. That'd be 30 children or young people. They're going to be spilling on Hildreth Street, biking, playing, running. That's what they should do, because that's a short street. And it's just going to add to the danger. But you look at those pictures, and like I said, they talk for themselves. You can't get a fire truck up there. And that's a T, I know, at the top of that road also. Which I highly against the T, especially as a former firefighter. You're never going to turn a truck around. You got to turn around in their driveway and break the septic systems. So, all right, thank you.
One question?
Sure.
You said that you thought it should be earlier. Chris had proposed 7 to 9:30.
Well, like I said, I come down from the gym. I think the high school buses pick up between 6 and 7.
High school bus picks up at 6:45.
6:45.
Yeah. And again, that's just Plum. I mean, that's the top of Perham, but potentially this new subdivision. Out of those 30 kids, how many are going to be high school kids going up top of Hildreth Street? We don't know that number. That's all these if factors. We don't know. It's a lot of high school, middle school, driving to school.
So, Chris, do you want to ask for an earlier time than 7?
Yeah.
Since you asked for it, what
Is
time?
the
do you
traffic
think?
consultant still on?
Yes. Scott's still with us.
Okay.
I don't know if 6:30 is a better time or
6:30,
not.
it sounds like.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that's just that one I just incorporated, and like I said, I know,
Well, if the bus pickup is at 6:45.
yeah, like I said, I
Isn't
always
there a
see him, I
camera you
almost,
talked about
actually,
putting up
almost,
for a number of days?
I cut in through the street, and the kid had his earpods on, he's cutting across the street in the dark, I'm stopped, trying to pull onto a pair, I'm going, he's like, so that's all, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Linda Carney, 17 Hildreth and 19 Plum. Thank you for seeing me again. Just a couple of points of reference. School buses do come down Plum Street now, and I'm sure they will continue to do so if we add more children. I think that was a question you had, and somebody assumed that they wouldn't be going into that neighborhood. They do. And the other thing is it's Grove and Summer Street, not Grove and Route 129, where the intersection is. Grove does not hit Billricker Road at all.
Right.
It hits Summer Street. And I just wanted to mention again, even though we brought it up the last time, the people coming down from the center by the library and what used to be the old Stop and Shop Plaza, come down, they take a right on Grove Street, even though there's a do not turn right sign, and they cut through Grove to Plum to Hildreth to get to Golden Cove. And we're afraid that it's going to become a reverse cut through with the addition of these cars. And it really will impact that Summer Street entrance at Grove as well as where Summer Street hits. The reason why they cut through is because where Summer Street comes out, it doesn't hit automatically with Fletcher. It isn't a straight across. So it really gets confusing as to who stops where and when. And by cutting through, they don't have that issue. and they get by the fire station quicker. They avoid the fire station if that
Mhm.
should be stopped. So just pointing those things out. And what else did I have? I think, oh, I'm sorry, but I do take offense at this contractor's misrepresentation on the paperwork as far as having roads that show that there's an exit, street names misnamed, and all the other errors that have been brought before this board on the paperwork as proposed, and calling Perham Pelham. Let's get the facts straight. I don't think that's asking too much, and I think it's slapping the neighbors upside the head. We live there. At least recognize what our street names are. And if you're not embarrassed by that, we are. Thank you very much.
Hi, Marcy Comtois, 24 Hilda Street. Yes, I'm down the dead end part. Appreciate the traffic study. Couple quick questions on it. First of all, like there was talk about the snow. Like we can go out and study traffic now, but you're not seeing kids really out playing. You're not seeing bike riders going around the neighborhood. It's too cold for that stuff. So is this, like, when is this really going to be looked at? The snow is a significant problem. They plow 129 and it piles up. This is the first year I don't have a kid waiting for a bus because he's now 16 and has his license. My kids have been afraid to go up in the snow to wait for their buses because the buses, one, can't see them through the snow piles, and two, cars can't see them because when they plow, they just push it all up to the corner of 129, and the piles are higher than my children. My son is 6 feet tall. So these are things like, I want the traffic study, I want the safety study, more out of the traffic study done for the safety of our children and our families on the street. But if we're looking at it today, we're not getting the big picture. Second, I know there's been the question about the study of the soil and stuff like that. Again, no pictures have been taken on the property. You can see some things from Google Earth that shows cars that are slightly like deteriorating and been there for years. But just for a general knowledge, these cars have been there since I've moved in. We're talking 12 years. Just sitting there, been on the property forever. So I can understand why you want to know about the study and why you keep hearing from the neighbors saying things have been going on back there. Because these vehicles have been there for years. They haven't moved. We've seen things just move around, but they have been there. And even on Google Earth, when you type in that address and you start to go in as close as you can see things that don't belong on the land still back there. Thank you.
It's a race.
Let's just give it.
Hi, I'm Judith Gothier. I live at 22 Hildreth Street. And just to show the size of the street, we had National Grid had a tree thing come to cut branches off. And they parked in front of my house. We had to have them moved because my husband had to leave to go to a doctor's because they took up the whole street in front of the house. And my grandson called because he couldn't get home because they were up by where the mailboxes are, and he couldn't get down the street. So he went around and parked, came down Perham, parked on Plum, and walked home while they were there. But I took some pictures of what it's like when they're working on the street with a big truck, and I just want to put those in so you can see how small, width-wise, the street is when a big truck is doing work.
I think we should hear from Paul Haverty.
Good evening, board members. My name is William Harvey. I'm the owner of 91 Billerica Road, which is a rental property. I don't reside there. I think the one issue that I discussed among multiple issues, and I'll make this discussion short, is the fact that there's no parking. There's no parking at this site. other than their driveways. Doing some investigation with regards to Bernard Lane. The reason why there's 5 buildings there, the reason why they would be able to put 5 buildings there, is because, I'm not saying this board, you individuals, but when it was approved by the planning board, there was no requirement of parking. Had the board required parking, there'd only be 4 units there. That I know for a fact. And as you see that subdivision today, it's just filled with cars. The street, it's dangerous. But there's also another distinction with Bernard Lane in the current development, is Bernard Lane exits out to a road that has, a width of, that's required in Chelmsford for a public road. As opposed to the development here, it only comes out to, as we know, I measured 18 feet. It might even be a little bit wider than that. That needs to be taken into consideration. So if you take a look at Bernard Lane with those photographs, you wouldn't have seen all those cars had there been in a parking area. There's something else I wanted to say, but now I forget. But I'd like you to take that in consideration, as it's overdeveloped. There shouldn't be 6-unit buildings there. And as one of the previous members stated, this would be an unwarranted traffic hazard, in my opinion. I'm not opposed to the developing the land. I'm just opposed to the amount of units that'll be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then I'll take a motion.
Well, before we do that, I do want to suggest that we do adjust the times, since the consultant is still on. So we should start maybe at 6:30 in the morning instead of 7. And then just to clarify the intersections that I was looking for, I did notice that Grove does go to 129 between Hildreth and Perham. So I do want that one added. And I'm not sure we have to go all the way to Summer, but if we get Perham and Grove intersection, since there's only one way out from there, then that would cover the traffic flow going on to Summer. So those are the 2 intersections that I wanted to add.
Could you repeat that again for me, please?
Yep. So the intersection of 129 and Grove.
Yep.
And then the intersection of Grove, Perham, and Plum, that intersection there.
Okay. From 6, and we'll do 6:30 to 9:30.
Yep.
Okay.
Just a question or comment. There was a comment made about the appropriate time of the year, obviously the appropriate day and weather permitting to do the traffic study. But if the traffic study is proceeding, it's going to be done now. And so
Right.
if it's going to be not done now, the board needs to either understand that, or there's some sort of industry adjustment factor. And I think rather than just allow it to go on and then the results come back and they're questioned, the board should probably figure that out beforehand. No point doing a study if the whole thing's going to be questioned.
Yeah.
Are there any industry standards for adjusting pedestrian volumes for seasons?
Not that I'm aware of. There may be, we may have some count data of some locations, probably not in Chelmsford, but elsewhere in Massachusetts, where we can look at a winter type of, counts done during the winter and counts done, in the fall. But it's not, it's typically you don't, excuse me. We're looking at a representative condition, representative time period. Sometimes if you look at, typically what happens if you look at an over conservative condition, you wind up with a scenario that's not realistic. For something like this, I think we can, we'll look at the conditions. We'll do some measurements to see what a potential height of snowbank would be, for instance, because that's been noted as a concern. In terms of other adjustments for pedestrians, we'll have to look and see what we can find. It's not typically done.
Because I'm not sure we can wait for this.
Well, if the primary concern is children walking to the school bus or walking to school, I would think that someone would be able to get the information from the school department as to how many school bus students are at each stop, and then the other students are just walking. So it's not clear to me whether we actually need the number, or if we're just making an assumption that someone's walking along Hildreth and other streets, and you're doing some sort of analysis. Not really clear to me, but if we're looking for numbers, we should be able to get some of the numbers.
But I think if we're doing this study in the colder weather, the pedestrian numbers are going to be lower than likely warmer weather.
Right. That's why I was trying to tease out whether the primary concern was children walking or whether it was just anybody using the street.
I think it's anyone using the street. People are more likely to drive in the colder weather than walk, and so the car rates may be higher in the colder weather. Pedestrians might be lower. So that's something we may have to try and figure out when we get the data and when we get an idea of what the weather was on the day, on the days that these were recorded.
So a quick question. You mentioned that there would be a camera put up too?
Yep.
So, and how long's the duration for the camera? Was it 48 hours?
It's usually up there for it's up there for maybe somewhere between probably 30 and 48 hours.
Could you leave it longer?
We could. The issue is that the cost to collect this data really gets prohibitively expensive for video. And I think that the other thing is that when we collect the data, we typically we find out what the scope is, and then we make requests to a vendor, and they schedule accounts. And there's no way to. Usually, those are 2 to 3 weeks from when we initially request the counts. So we have no idea of knowing what the weather's going to be like that day. Sometimes it's great and it's conducive to non-vehicular travel, and sometimes it's not.
When we do get the data, can we make sure that we do get the weather conditions?
Yes.
For that?
That's
okay. I think we're just going to have to make some
assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I want to.
So just one other quick item. I believe last time we had talked about traffic going out to a peer review. if we were to revise the scope reflected the discussion tonight, so it's clear exactly what we're doing, would that be enough to effort, or to set Evan free to find a peer reviewer? It's gonna take us, a meeting, 4 weeks to conduct it. It'd be good to be able to have the peer review lined up so that when we issue the report, they can immediately review it.
What have we got?
What's that?
So who do we have?
Well, I would suggest that we pursue Beta.
Yeah. They've been
They're using Vanessa Associates, which the board has been using to do this peer review in the past, recent past. So that's not going to be an option.
Okay.
So I would suggest we start with Beta, since, we're engaged with them to begin with.
Do they have
They do have traffic, yes.
Do they have experience in doing these kinds of assessments of
I'll
particularly
find out.
related hazards?
I don't know. Do you have any? Anyone can send me a suggestion.
I don't, but Paul sent us. There was
Yes,
one of
he
those.
sent us the
one of
example.
those,
Yep. Okay.
Was particularly appropriate, I thought.
Anita?
Are we adjusting the vehicle count? Because I drive by Bernard Lane, and also there's another development, condo development, right at River Neck, right there, right almost across from the cemetery. I think it has 18 units, and those have cars parked on the street as well. And they have a garage and parking, and there's still a lot of cars parked on the street. There's a lot more cars than the initial assumption of vehicles that we're assuming here.
Well,
I'm
Anita,
wondering if we can apply actual developments.
that's why I recommended the method of the counts that I recommended.
Okay.
Because of the where that neighborhood is and the character of that neighborhood, current traffic counts could be adjusted with an increase in the units. So take whatever. So rather than using the ITE numbers, if we're saying that the units will be increasing by 20%, increase the current traffic counts by 20% as well. Because I think the current traffic counts would give a more representative indication of the conditions of that neighborhood.
But one thing we're lacking with the current counts is an older neighborhood, right, that people have moved in various times. If we look at Bernard and we look at the lot at the end of River Neck, which is also a condominium that came up in the last 10 years, initially it's all young couples. I mean, you can just pull the data and find out how old these people are. I mean, and the amount of cars, I think, is, as opposed to like an older neighborhood, which may have some, elderly folks like my parents. Now they're down to one car, right? Versus two young professionals buying their first home. That's my only question. Like, should we look at those two areas, which were new developments, and how many people moved in? And use, maybe something like that as a basis, or at least as a reasonability check to our assumption.
Well, I mean,
Let the peer review
there's-
consultant figure it
yeah,
out.
I think we should let the consultants do it. I mean, there's standard ways to do a traffic analysis, and we've asked for special focus on the pedestrian safety, because that's one of the main concerns for everyone here. But, I mean, I don't think we're gonna rejigger the whole way a traffic study gets done.
But I do think that using the ITE numbers is not that realistic for a neighborhood like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could, I think that, with the intersections that we'll be counting and, capturing all the trips for the houses that are in this neighborhood, I think that's probably a pretty wide cross section of residents. So, I think it gives a pretty good estimate of what's likely to go there, based on what's currently there and what the traffic generation profiles are of the current users.
Okay. I will take a motion.
I would move.
Continue
that
to December 13th.
Okay, to continue to December 13th.
Okay. And
I'll second that.
I'll take a second and take a vote.
Aye.
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 Unanimous? Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we're on to 93 Brick Hill Road. Requesting site plan approval for the construction of a 49,910 square foot industrial warehouse building with integrated surface parking, loading facilities, and on-site infrastructure improvements. The site's located in the IA zoning district and is shown as parcel ID, map 88, block 271, lot 3, and consists of approximately 9.63 acres. The applicant requests special permits, excuse me, request special permits per Article 11, Major Business Complex, Article 14, Aquifer Protection, Article 5, Off-Street Parking and Loading, and Site Plan Review, and any other permit relief deemed necessary under the zoning bylaw to allow for the proposed use.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Christine Hung, attorney at Reamer and Bronstein. With me tonight, I have members of the development team. We're going to make this a quick presentation. We were last before you in the middle of September. We are still going through some of our reports. Our stormwater is being peer reviewed by Coughlin. We are conducting a traffic study, and that is still in process with the focus on the intersections at the Brick Hill and UPS Drive, as well as the Brick Hill Route 129 intersections. So that is in process. Brian Goudreau over at Hancock and I spoke with the Board of Health, and we are going to be conducting a hydrogeo study. We received an estimate that came back that was astronomically expensive to the tune of like $36,000. So we are looking at another option just to compare to see if there is a little bit of a cheaper option to go with. But we are moving forward on trying to find a consultant to do that. Tonight, we just wanted to come back to give you some updates on the site plan revisions that as well as the architecture. Our architect is here as well. And then we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record again, Brian Goodrow with Hancock Associates. So we issued a summary letter that responded to DPW comments, Water Department comments, Fire Department comments, as well as Board of Health. So generally speaking, a lot of kind of minor things. A couple of the biggies were with relation to the dumpster. We clearly identified that on the plan. At the same time, I know there was a concern kind of about the location and the turning movements of trucks within loading docks, so we looked at that very specifically to make sure that there were no conflicts there, and there are not. Generally speaking, the other DPW comments had to do with kind of identifying existing utilities within UPS Road and pipe sizes and things like that. That's all now on the plan. And then also clarification on the sewer connection. We have issued a letter to DPW requesting that we be put in the credit plan. And then we also gave the breakdown of 2 times the expected flow that the building will generate as fees, and the total fees ended up being about $103,000 for this building.
103,000
for sewer connection fees. That's strictly a connection fee. And then additionally, I believe last time there was a question about snow storage. So we had looked at the plan, looked at specific areas that we could allow for snow storage within the site, and further, we also looked at the areas grading wise so that we could essentially pitch the landscaped areas earmarked for snow storage towards pavement to allow the snow melt to be treated by the on-site stormwater system, the series of underground chambers located throughout the site. I think those are the only things I want to call attention to. I'm happy to answer questions. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Michael Kern to go over the architecturals and the renderings that he's prepared.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, board members. Again, Michael Kern. I'm an architect working with the applicant. We have not changed the footprint of the building or the building elevations or the building height, but at the last meeting we attended, there was a request to provide a rendering from the Brick Kiln Road to UPS Access Drive, and so I've generated that. And Evan, if you could just scroll down a couple more. These are the same renderings as before. So this is a photo taking from directly across from that access road. Given the turn that heads to the UPS area, you can see that this is actually the most visible the building will be from this vantage point, because the further you head up the road from this vantage point, it actually gets blocked off by that retaining wall and that stand of trees and the building with the green mansard roof. And then as you head more towards 129, it's again then blocked off by the vegetation that abuts the wetland heading in that direction. So I chose this vantage point because you would see the most portion of the building from that location. The building roof height is 36 feet, and that's what you see appropriately scaled in that rendering. So that's what we prepared for this presentation, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's nothing to do with the architecture, but for purposes of scheduling, do you think you're gonna have Concom stormwater back before December 13th? Do you think you'll be prepared to attend planning board on the 13th? And if so, what would you be presenting?
Just in terms of the stormwater review, we have conservation scheduled for the 14th, which is next week, and we anticipate getting that peer review back prior to. So if we were to be continued to that December meeting, we should be able to have that resolved prior to.
What about your traffic study?
Wait, I'm sorry, you're going to have for the 14th meeting, you're going to get it back?
Concom meeting, nothing to do with you.
We will receive the peer review from the peer reviewer prior to the Concom
so you'll
meeting
have time
next
to-
week.
okay.
So if we're out to December 14th, it gives us a month, more than a month.
This is a case where we agreed to piggyback on Concom's
Right.
stormwater.
Right.
As for traffic, I haven't heard back from our traffic engineer. He's not here tonight. I did reach out to him. It is in process. I'm hoping that we'll be ready for the December 13th hearing. But if not, if traffic isn't ready, at least we can talk about stormwater at that time and then do traffic another night.
And what was it you said you were waiting on that was so expensive?
The hydro-geo report, that's through the Board of Health and the water district.
Yeah, because with the meeting schedule, we have the 13th of December, and then it goes to January, right?
Yeah, because of the holiday.
Yeah, unless you schedule special meetings.
Right, okay.
So does that schedule sound okay? If traffic is not done by December 13th, we'll discuss stormwater, and then we can do traffic at another hearing.
Subsequent, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, one question I had about the stormwater was that there was a question of additional test pits being done for seasonal high groundwater. Was that included in what has that been done, or is that pending the peer review of the the Concom peer review?
Yeah, so we're gonna wait until the peer reviewer has a chance to review.
Okay. All right, thank you. And also, this is, I could go back and look, but I'm lazy, so I'll ask you right now. Did you say in the beginning that the site had not been used for anything prior to this? That it was just basically an unused site?
I don't recall if I said that.
My understanding of the site history was that there was once a single-family house
Okay.
on the property, that there was a fire, so it I don't know if it burned down or if, but there was a fire, but there was a single-family residence on
Okay,
that property.
yeah. Okay, yeah, because I noticed in the 2004 view, there was a structure there with like
Yeah.
7 cars or something, and so, okay. So that was, all right, thank you.
I had a couple questions on the site plan. Where the trailer parking is, it looks like there's a wall, a retaining wall, and a chain link fence on the inside of it.
Correct. So typically when you look at these large gravity block walls, you're gonna place either a fence or a guardrail on top of the physical wall. So with large gravity block, the block generally carries the guardrail, and then we would fence it either directly in front of it or would physically attach the chain link fence to the guardrail post itself.
So the snow storage that's right up against that chain link fence would likely be pushed right through the chain link fence.
Through the island?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, it's a chain link fence, so potentially snow would be pushed through it.
Okay. And then the other snow storage on the corner of the building, it looks like it's on top of the walkway as well.
The corner of the building.
So in that
Are
same,
we on sheet 5?
yeah, on sheet 5.
Is that to the left of the building or the right of the building? On the right?
On the top left.
Is that not the same island that we're talking about? There is not a sidewalk over there on the top.
No,
right hand.
it's up against the building near the loading docks. The snow storage on that corner, the back corner. It's this one right here.
I might be looking at the wrong plan.
Page 4 on the
Got
on the
it.
screen.
I apologize. I was looking at sheet 5, the initial build out. Yes, so that line is in air. Obviously, we're not going to be storing snow in the middle of a sidewalk, and we can revise that accordingly.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Do we want to take it around?
I have nothing particular at this point. I mean, I think we have information to get, but
We're
I
waiting
think
on a
it's-
lot of things.
Looks pretty sane.
Good right now.
Okay. All right, I'll take a motion.
I will move to continue until, what's the date for this?
December 13th.
December 13th?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anita?
Thank you.
Is
Aye.
also an
Aye.
aye. Okay.
Okay.
Liaison updates. I'm not doing the Concom moment unless there's something else
Nope.
other than your,
Nope. I gave an update at the last meeting. There hasn't been one since, and the meetings in November are going to be weird
Yep.
Yeah.
and staggered.
They're all messed up.
I can give you the unofficial Board of Health liaison report. I
Sure.
went to the meeting on Monday, and so they received a lot of comments on their GPZ rules and regulations, so they're gonna form a working group when their third member comes back. And so they will let us know when that is if we want to sit in on it.
You sat through all the incoming and outgoing correspondence.
Well, it was kind of funny because there was just two of them. But then at the end also, I let them know that we had a working group, a joint working group between Concom and
Yeah.
the Planning Board to discuss the 270 Billerica and
go far.
let them know. And so we have extended the invitation to them as well if they want to sit in on it. So which only made sense.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's it.
Great.
Well, let's see, we're gonna have a master plan implementation committee meeting next week, so with a little luck, in a couple of weeks, I'll have something to report. Am I on any other ones that I've forgotten about?
I don't know. It's not my turn to keep track.
It was kind of like that dream you have in college, where you wake up 2 days before exams start and realize there's this course you signed up for that you completely forgot about. Remember that dream?
Anything, Anita? John?
No, the last Board of Appeals meeting was the same night as our last planning board meeting, so.
Okay.
Oh, they did it at night?
Oh, no, the Board of, the zoning
Oh,
board.
the
of-
ZBA.
yeah.
Sorry.
Just on that, I didn't attend that meeting, but Becky from my office updates me. The ZBA spent significant time discussing ADUs. The Housing Advisory Board, for the last couple of meetings, has also been discussing ADUs. This is likely to evolve into a committee made up of Planning Board, Housing Advisory Board, Zoning Board, and likely some citizen reps or housing advocates. So just an FYI, there seems to be, at least from the Zoning Board, there seems to be significant interest in major zoning amendments to the existing limited accessory apartment bylaw. And then there's also an interest in potentially allowing detached and by right, and removing the existing family relationship.
Well, I mean, did something come to us from the state yet? Or they're just
So
making
there's,
noises?
so there is current bills that are proposed to make it by right. We'll see where that goes. I expect there to be significant opposition to that from suburban communities. If you followed Lowell City Council spent almost, 6, 9, 12 months discussing ADUs, and it started off as with good intent, and at the 11th hour, it failed at the city council to get the votes.
What does an ADU stand for?
An accessory dwelling unit. So granny pods, I mean, there's all different kinds of names, and
Tiny house.
tiny houses, and,
But they're gonna be separate, they don't have to be attached?
correct, that's one of the options being discussed. So there's a lot of complexities, as you can imagine, if you have to tie it into the wastewater system, or can you have a tight tank, or in Title V, and I've engaged
And this would be
briefly.
in all zones?
Yeah,
allowed?
yeah,
Or would we have
it
to
depends. I mean,
choose?
all this needs to be discussed. I've engaged briefly with Housing Advisory Board and Zoning Board, and, for what it's worth, I've tried to indicate to them that if you look at the most recent town meeting from a year ago, where we attempted to make some modifications to single and two-family zoning relief, my takeaway, my message to Housing Advisory Board and Zoning Board was, I'm not sure that there is public sentiment to allow basically a second dwelling unit on all single-family lots. The planning board's discussed, two-family zoning districts, RCs. So I think there's a lot to be discussed. But I think part of the angle here is trying to provide easier housing options for seniors not only seniors to live in, but seniors to continue to live in their main house to provide an income stream. So there may be options that evolve, but just an FYI, I mean, this is a major topic among several boards.
But also, it's a major topic at the state level.
Yeah, and the state may resolve the issue. If the state adopts by right ADUs statewide, then there's not much to debate at the local level. Then and then we have to figure out how to do it as a by right bylaw.
Sounds like a lot of funding.
Yeah.
Okay. New business. I don't have any minutes to approve. Did everyone have a chance to look?
Yes.
I read one of them, I didn't read the other one, and now I can't remember which one. And computer's on ZBA, so I can't look at it.
Did have one change on the August 23rd minutes. The last line of the number 4 discussion item, which says the agreement runs with the land, should, I think, be the last sentence of the discussion item before, which is UMass. It didn't quite make sense in that spot. So I think it was just miscopied.
Yeah. So Becky will make that revision if you vote to approve.
Okay, take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the August 9th minutes. And you want to do them both together, or?
Oh, separately, please.
All right. Make a motion to approve the August 9th.
I'll
meeting
second that.
Aye.
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 I'll make a motion to approve the August 23rd
Second.
minutes. Aye.
I'm
Aye, aye,
gonna
aye.
abstain from
Aye.
that one.
Then I bet Mike's got a motion he wants to make.
Anita,
No, I don't.
Anita, I forgot to query you on the first minutes. Are you okay with both of those minutes?
Raised her hand.
Sorry. Okay, I will take a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.